I bought a property solely with credit cards. But it was all because I went into the trenches, really had a trial by fire experience. And it was all during COVID. So we had a property manager to start. And then during COVID, they wouldn't go in the building. And we would get squatters because of that, because they wouldn't turn the units. It was in a bad area. So we had to fire the property manager and manage it ourselves from 6 hours away.
Welcome to The Breakthrough with Stephen Husted, the show that takes you behind the scenes with successful entrepreneurs, real estate investors, and other movers and shakers in the business world. In each episode, we'll sit down with our guests to explore their personal and professional journeys, including the challenges they faced, the breakthrough moments that propelled them to success, and the strategies and the tactics they used to get there. Get inspired by new ideas and strategies and get to know our guests on a deeper level. Join us for candid conversations, powerful insights, and plenty of breakthrough moments. Please help us grow by subscribing and sharing the podcast, and welcome to the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to The Breakthrough with Stephen Husted. Today we're diving into the real gritty side of real estate with Sara Aviles. Sarah's not your average investor. She started young, buying her first property at 21, and quickly learned the ropes through hands-on experience with some of the toughest properties you can imagine. Today we're going to unpack Sarah's journey through the challenges of managing a 12-unit building in a notoriously tough area, especially during the strains of the pandemic. She'll share how she handled everything from tricky tenant issues to major management decisions that could make or break an investment. Sarah's experience offers a deep dive into the realities of real estate that many shy away from discussing. Stick around to get unfiltered scoop on making it in a tough market. Stick around to get an unfiltered scoop on making it in tough markets. Sarah.
Hey, Stephen.
How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, this is great. I love it when I start to talk to a guest prior to, and I've had a few that have never been on a podcast, and they get on and they're so like, and so I try to say, hey, we're just going to have a conversation. There's no structure to it. And some come on and they're having technical difficulties or just unsure of how to jump on a podcast. How did that feel? I didn't know that this is going to be your first one. So how was this leading up to it? Because I get nervous.
Good. Yeah. Well, I mean, I do public speaking and stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm it can't be that much different. It's just figuring out lighting, making sure you have a mic.
That is, yep.
Those important things.
Yep. I saw, so good old Alex Bakiza. So we're in a transaction. We just closed on a refinance, and he had told me, he's like, oh, you got to meet this lady, Sarah. She just crushed it. She was at one of our meetups and she just blew the audience away. He's like, I think you should get her on the podcast. I'm like, okay. I'm like, pass me your information. So that's how we ended up, you ended up on the show. So
yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah. How'd you meet Alex?
Through his actual meetup group that he does. So
Okay.
I went and showed up. I was it's a block or two away from my house, so it's kind of embarrassing if I don't show up. He's like, where are you? I'm like, oh, I just leave the house, block and 2 blocks over.
Can't use excuse, there's traffic.
Yeah, I can't use traffic excuses. I'm just yeah, I wasn't here today.
Oh, wow. How many have you been to?
I think I've been to 3, maybe 4. Once he found out I wrote a book, he was like, okay, tell me all about it. I want you to speak. I want you to talk about it and be part of our speaker series. And I was supposed to be the second one, but I started out being the first person speaking at their group. And I was like, oh, great. I don't know how this is going to go and what the setup's going to be. So I went into that one kind of blind.
Yeah, I saw a couple of the clips on Instagram from it. So, and Alex has recommended a few guests onto my podcast. He'll just reach out to me and go, hey, you need to get this person on. I'm like, okay, which is great. You know what I mean? Because I'm always looking. Yeah, he's a good connector. Totally. Mm-hmm. So I'm eager to kind of dive into your story because it seems like you got a lot of cool things going on. Question is, where do we start on this? You know what? I was thinking of something before we got on. I wanted to start asking some of my guests, especially the entrepreneurs, what type of jobs did you have growing up before you got
Mm,
into real estate? Can we start
sales,
there?
sales.
Everything, everything was sales. Okay, that's
Everything
good.
was sales from my first job in retail sales to doing digital marketing, advertising sales. Um, Always been in sales.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's a great skill to have in real
Mhm.
estate, right?
Oh, for sure. You're always selling yourself, whether it's for real estate or something else, whether you're meeting someone, you know,
Yeah,
sales is
yeah,
something we do every day, whether we realize it or not.
it's true. That's true. So how did that? So what led you into real estate? And did you start off as an agent first, or were you an
No,
investor
I
first?
actually recently got my license 2 years ago because I was having so many opportunities land in my lap that I just missed out on because I didn't have my license. People were like, "Oh, sell my multi-million-dollar house." I was like, "I would love to, but I don't have my license." So, I actually decided to get that after investing in real estate for almost 10 years.
Oh wow.
I got obsessed with it when I was in college, actually. I went to school for fashion design under family and consumer sciences. And I took a class that was actually, I think it was called How to Manage a Household. And I was like, what the hell is this class? I'm going to
Yeah.
learn about, taking care of babies and like cleaning the house. Why do I have to take this? It was actually the best class I ever took in college because they talked about investing and how to manage your money. And that's part of it. So he introduced me to different books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And once I read that book, I was hooked. I was reading every real estate book I could get my hands on. I mean, what 20-year-old doesn't want to be financially free?
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
a very attractive dream. So I was obsessed with real estate, reading all the books I could get my hands on, and was determined to buy my first property right after graduating college, which I did at the age of 21. So I bought my first property when I was 21 with the plans to live in it and when I could move out and rent that property as my first property, just to get into the deal with the as least amount down as possible. And man, every time I did a deal, it felt like I was gonna run off a cliff. Like I felt like I was a vomit every single time. But it was just getting past each deal and getting into them and getting more and more comfortable. And so I was able to trade up from my little single family home into a 12-unit apartment complex.
Oh wait. So okay, okay. So you went from a single family to a 12 unit, or just and you jump from that to a 12 unit.
Yes.
There you go. All
Mhm.
right. So that's a good thing to tell the audience about limiting beliefs and knowing that, you have to have a certain way to start, and everybody starts a certain way, and everybody's on their own journey. But what was the difference? Do you feel like they were both similar as far as the deal and how big they were? Like, did you put the same amount of work in on the 12 unit as you did the single family? Tell
No,
me how that
no, not
process
at
was.
all. So I was a very new investor. I had a single family home with only one tenant ever in it. They were lovely tenants, never had any issues. And I was like, this is not hard at all. I'm just gonna jump right in and buy a 12 flex. I was
Mhm.
like, this is so easy. And then I didn't do as much research. I didn't know all the steps that I need to take. I didn't even use a commercial real estate agent. I used a residential one. So I fell in a bunch of potholes.
Ooh,
And I had the best education that you could possibly get because I bought a 12-plex in one of the most dangerous cities in the United States in the worst 4 blocks of that city. So police officers would get shot on this street. That's how dangerous it was. And I'd seen the street, we'd toured the property. It was an anomaly. It was a beautiful day. There was no homeless on the street. The streets were clean. It seemed super, super nice. And I was like, it looks good. The numbers penciled out. And then we got into the reality of it. And I was like, oh, well, it's hard to get insurance on a property, or property managers tell you they don't work in that area. It's probably a reason why. But with that said, we learned so much from what not to do that it was able to make me look at other deals and be like, how worse could it be? Like,
right. From starting there. Yeah.
from starting there, I was like, I gave me the confidence to invest out of state. I bought a property solely with credit cards. Um, but it was all because I went into the trenches, really had a trial by fire experience. And it was all during COVID. So we had a property manager to start. And then during COVID, they wouldn't go in the building. And we would get squatters because of that, because they wouldn't turn the units. It was in a bad area. So we had to fire the property manager and manage it ourselves from 6 hours away.
So much to unpack there. You're telling this story, and it's leading into it's very similar to mine too.
Yeah.
Well, the big one is, I think a lot of new investors will overanalyze and overthink the whole process. They'll consume all this content and read books and do all this stuff, and then they won't take action because they feel like they're just not ready in every avenue. And it really goes to show that it's almost better not to be, to just get going, and you're going to learn. And it really comes down to those learning experiences on your
Oh,
first
yeah.
properties and getting in the trenches and making all those mistakes. And then you just build from that. But that's the big thing where it stops people from investing is it's got to have the perfect scenario to just start to jump in. And there's never a perfect scenario. I don't care
Yeah,
how many properties you have.
just know enough to be dangerous. I mean, like, right now,
Yeah.
we were looking at a deal to do, like, development, like an ADU kind of flip thing, and I'm like, "I don't have the money. Where are we getting the money for this?" I'm like, "Don't worry about it. Just put a primary residence loan." Made the offer. If we get the offer, we're gonna find the money because it's a great deal and work our way through it. So
Yes.
it's one of those things, like, you don't always have all the answers laid out for you. Like, we found the property that we bought with credit cards in Indiana. We saw this amazing deal. We acted within, like, that hour. We're like, "We don't have the money. What are we gonna do?" And I was like, "Well, we have these credit cards. We have this
Let's
amount of
max these
credit
out.
limit." Well, we were smart about it. They all were zero APR, 0 interest for a year or 2.
Yes. Okay. That's
Use
another story.
plastic. Yeah, use plastic, and we were able to buy, a triplex out of state entirely on credit cards.
And then let's back up here. I want to go back to the 12 unit. I'm really stuck on that part right now. You didn't hire a commercial broker. Okay, so
No.
that's first and foremost. So let me ask you this. How did you underwrite the deal?
Um,
Like, how
I
did you
don't know.
know? Because there are two different types of
No.
brokers. Did your residential broker understand how to like underwrite a deal? And no.
No, I was the one doing all of that. He was just opening the door for me and giving me the connections. So the biggest thing that I had to do all the underwriting myself, but the big hiccup we had by not using a commercial real estate agent is we didn't know how to do estoppel agreements.
Right.
Well, none of our units had estoppel agreements on it, and the owner gave us numbers that weren't accurate,
Of course.
rent that weren't accurate. So we had all these numbers that we were underwriting that weren't accurate. Just because we didn't have estoppel agreements, there was no really enforceable way to go and come back at him for that. I mean, we could, but then it's just a bunch of court fees. So we just had to grin and bear it and move on and take that on the chin as a hard-learned lesson.
Right. Right. And so explain the estoppel agreements, and also, did you get a T12 from was this a tired old landlord that just did everything
No,
kind of
this is a
under the
landlord
radar?
that bought a property vacant. I think it was at auction, so he was flipping it, and so we didn't realize he was just filling the units with bodies. So we got it with 100% occupied building, but none of them were screened. They were all very poor applications for this building.
Yeah.
So we had to go through and get slowly but surely put in higher quality tenants throughout the entire building. We did get the financials for the full year, like you were asking, and I was able to get all the rent rolls, get all the information I needed to do the underwriting, but a lot of it wasn't accurate. A
Yeah.
lot of it was like written on pieces of paper, like scraps. So this is what I got. Here's some of the rents, and they literally wrote it down on just this piece of scrap paper. There was no real good accounting system because they knew they were just trying to fill it and move on. They weren't trying to keep it or grow the building. And then a lot of the work they did was really shoddy too, like behind the walls, the electrical systems and stuff like that. So as you get deeper and deeper into a property, you're like, oh, look what they did here. Look at these corners we cut. So you have to like kind of see. So now I'm a little bit more wary when I buy properties that someone bought from auction and trying to flip, because I know they're trying to just move it as quickly as possible. The construction probably was faster than it should have been. They filled it with people that they didn't really care about long term. So that was
Yeah.
something that we learned the hard way.
That's a pretty wild story. So he was basically getting people in there and trying to prove just to get the NOI up. The
Yeah,
net
and they weren't all
operating.
paying.
Yeah.
It hadn't even been a year, and they weren't like half the year they weren't paying rent.
That is really great. So what did you do So then you had tenants, you had squatters, you had
Yeah.
tenants not paying. Then you had to start to do some evictions. Obviously, you were losing money, I would
hmm
imagine.
Well, actually, once we got into the building, we were able to stabilize it pretty quickly. So we
Really?
actually still had a pretty hefty cash flow.
Yeah, that's good.
So the property was making money. It was just, I felt like the property aged me 10 years, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I lost years of my life, but I was making money. It's just, some of these properties are just not, even if they do make money, they're not necessarily worth it to hold on to just because of the amount of effort and not even effort, the stress it has. Like we dealt
Yeah.
with dealing with drug lords trying to trap out of our unit. We dealt with people putting swimming pools in our unit.
I'm
We
sorry, what?
had
Did you say a swimming pool in one of the
yes,
units?
swimming pool. They were upset they didn't have a bathtub. We had only showers, so they set up a swimming pool in their unit. I was like, you can't do that. So, yeah, some crazy stories. The other thing I learned too with some of these buildings, you have to be very careful, especially if it's low income Section 8, around your electrical boxes. Cause I realized it's a thing where some tenants, they don't want to pay their electrical. So they'll go in, break into the electrical box and switch the wiring around so other units pay for their electricity. So what we had to
Yeah.
do is go through every single one of those 12 units, change all the wiring back to the correct unit, one by one, outlet per outlet. And then once we got it fixed, we put a jail style door on the basement. Nothing was getting in because we had people crowbarring it open and trying to get in, mess with the electrical system. So that was
Wow.
a really expensive lesson for us. So now with all our properties, all the electrical systems are very much contained. Like no one's getting access to it because it's a very expensive thing to go through if you have to go and redo all the wiring, especially if you're using electricians that are going on emergency time.
Right.
It's, emergency time, they come out and they charge you double, maybe
Yes.
triple what they
Yeah.
normally charge.
Yeah, absolutely. This is some really good information. This is so good.
I mean, I feel like people are like, "Oh, you don't have as many properties as me." I'm like, "Yeah, but I had them all compacted into one experience."
Yeah. You were in the deep when you were bringing up the electrical part, I was like, and then you brought up something else. There's so much here to unpack. Um, One of my first properties out in the Midwest was in Detroit,
Uh-huh.
East Detroit. And
Okay.
when I bought it, I'm like, 34,000. I'm gonna pay cash. It's gonna make 850 a month. I'm like, this is a no-brainer. And, I did my due diligence. I cruised the neighborhood, Google mapped and, checked, and I knew where it was at by a lot of different like big box, like Home Depot and Walmart and these things. I'm like, okay, these are legitimate places people could work. There was a hospital a couple miles away. So I did all my due diligence. I went out to the Bigger Pockets conference and they had a Detroit meetup group that was kind of
Mm.
outside, during like intermission or something. And so I jumped in on it and people were talking about properties. I go, hey, I just bought my first property in Detroit. And they're like, where? And so I tell them and they're like, how'd you pick, how did you pick that part of the block of that street? And I go, well, I cruised Google Maps. It looked like the nicest of those streets right there. There wasn't as many boarded up houses. And she's like, well, yeah, that's the best block in that area. That was a good, you chose right. And it was a great property in the very beginning. I was like crushing it. I'm like, okay, this is 850. I'm making cash flow, and then I put a loan on it and, still was making great cash flow. And it was like a little mini ATM. Had a great
Mhm.
tenant. It was right during the beginning of COVID. Like she moved in 2019 and then COVID started and she stayed in there. And then she got out. And after she got out, everything went to shit.
Mm.
It turned into the biggest nightmare I've ever gone through in so many different ways. Squatters, 2 squatters. The property has a squatter in there right now that, said came up with a fake lease, somehow got in the house, said that somebody met her there, whatever the case may
Mhm.
be. We were able to, get her off the long-term lease with this quote unquote "other landlord," and
Mhm.
we got her on our own month-to-month lease. Okay, so that was
Mhm.
step 1. We got that, and it was just, she wouldn't pay on time. It's 20 days, it's 30 days, and now she's not. Now we're in the middle of eviction. I think we got 2 full months of rent, but didn't get the water in her name. That's in my name still. The electrical got stolen so many times. It got broken into so many different times, and I think it's a target from somebody in the neighborhood. And
Mm,
so I'm at this point where what you just brought up, is it really worth that money to me for
yeah.
the stress that I'm going through? Yes, it cash flows, and you can talk about this. People talk about it on social media all the time, like, oh, you can not saying you can't invest in the Midwest in sketchy areas. You can, but just understand what you're getting yourself into. It's not cut and dry. You might make $400 a month in cash flow, all said and done, but you might have these big issues coming up that are going to just wipe out all that cash flow.
Yeah,
Like,
and then
it
also
is
it just
that way.
comes down to, even if you still have the cash flow, if you're the one managing it and getting these calls where you're raking your head,
Yeah.
trying to come up with solutions, trying to deal with a police department, like, is that something you
Yes.
really want to be handling? With that said, my property was fine while I had someone else managing it. Like, my property is now in Indiana, I have someone else managing it, so I don't get any of those kind of calls, and it's that peace of mind. Everyone's like, I talk to, they're like, "Oh, I can just manage it from out of state." I'm like, "Yes, you totally can. I know many people who do, but do you want to?"
Yeah. Oh,
Is
I
the
don't want
question.
to, and I don't, but I feel like even with a property management company in the mix, uh, it's still a lot of hands-on. Like right now we're going through the
Mm,
eviction process, and they said, "Oh, we went to the first hearing." I'm like, "Okay, what did the attorney say?"
yeah.
Now I'm like, "Okay, give me the attorney's phone number. I'm gonna call him." You know what I mean? Like, where are we
Is
at?
that
Okay,
your personality, though? Like, are you a really hands-on person?
um, I I don't want to be.
Yeah.
But I think when things aren't stabilized correctly, I think when I know when a property's stabilized and it's running good, I'm kind of like, I step away. But I think I start interjecting myself within the portfolio when I see
Mm,
issues. You know what I mean? Like if I know something's going on over here, I start to pay attention to it more until it's kind of okay, now it's running good, or I don't know, there's so much to it. So you
yeah.
you have the 12 unit, you got where's the 12 unit at, by the way? Can you say?
It was in Stockton, California.
Okay. And
Yeah.
you're in California.
Yeah, I'm in California, in Southern California, Los Angeles.
Okay.
So it was, but I grew up in Marin County, so but I never really heard of Stockton, even though I was so close, and so I didn't really understand how dangerous it was on that street. And the funny thing was, it was between a property in Stockton or Sacramento, and I was just killing myself for not taking the
Taking the
Sacramento
Sacramento.
route, which now it's like shooted up in value. I'm just like, oh, but you know what? Now I have great stories, and I learned a lot from the experience. So you can't
Yeah,
go wrong.
you can't go no, you can. It's like stepping stones. You know what I mean? Like, it really is. So, you got the 12 unit, and then you have something in Indiana.
Yeah, I have 8 units, in Indiana. I have it mainly in Anderson and Muncie, Indiana. So it's
Yeah.
about 45 minutes, north of Indianapolis.
How's that been for you?
Oh, I love it. It's complete night and day from California. Like, it's the most number 1 landlord-friendly state in the United States. So the
Yeah.
rules, I'm more likely to take more risks over there because I know the rules are in my favor. I'm more likely to let in a tenant that I wouldn't in California and give them a chance, out there, because I know if something goes wrong, I can get them out. So that's a very big difference. I do specialize a lot in C-class properties, Section 8, and it's a different mentality out there. People actually pay on time compared to California. Like, it's just a whole different mentality shift.
I feel like that's how it is in Kansas City for us
Yeah.
as well. I don't think it's as landlord friendly anymore as it was
Mhm.
in the very beginning when we first invested out there. But so then these are some really good points. Picking a landlord friendly state can make or break your business. Like, that's just the reality of it. You invest in California or Washington or New York, you expect that the tenant's going to have more more rights than you, and it's going to be harder to run your business. Period. End of story.
Yep.
But then you get into Indiana, and that allows you to take more risk, provide more housing, and be
Mhm.
comfortable doing it without feeling like there's a ton of red tape. I
Yep,
mean,
and then I can get
essentially.
more deals for sure. I mean, the price points are so much lower compared to California. I mean, during COVID, the triplex I bought it for $50,000 for a triplex.
Wow.
And it's now because of COVID, and, of course, inflation, it's doubled in value. But that was an area that did not really appreciate. Um, but it just cash flows like crazy. It brings in over $2,000 a month on a
Yeah.
$50,000 property. You just don't see that in California.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like an idea. There's some pros and cons to both of it. I almost feel like now we're pretty heavy in the Midwest, and I'm kind of shifting my gears towards doing more development style out in like Seattle and in here, just, building and going that direction and kind of building both. Now I'm kind of going in
Yeah.
that mode. I'm like going to do them both together and move up instead of just being so heavy in the Midwest.
Well, you need to diversify for sure.
Yeah.
You have cash flow and then you have appreciation. They don't always go together. So,
Yeah.
and then there's also, you want newer construction. Like my home's out in Indiana, they're old. Like
Right.
I want to also have newer construction in my portfolio to kind of balance it out.
Yeah. It's great. It's cool because there's so many different options, right? And you can kind of get going on one and start learning about it. And then of course you hear about something else that piques your interest and
Yeah, you're
you're
always looking at
trekking
all
off.
these different things. Like you focus
Yeah.
one thing at a time.
Well, and that is a big thing, right? I mean, would you agree? Like, you really have to stay pretty focused. I mentor new investors, and we'll start off like a single family, and the next minute they're like, "What about this? What about storage units? What about should I do an Airbnb?" And like, no, you should get a couple properties first. Start
Yeah.
here, and learn, make some mistakes, get
Mhm.
some systems in place,
Start
like
in one bucket and then expand to other ones as you master one.
yeah,
Because we're always going to be learning. And then if you're spread too thin, you're going to be making way too many mistakes.
yeah.
I mean, we're all going to make mistakes, but let's try to, be a little bit on the safer side in regards to that.
Absolutely. So give me some insights on Section 8. Like so you wrote a book on Section 8.
Well,
How
I
did
wrote
you
a
get up
book
to that?
about my experience just with this one property. All my horror stories are in this one book, Confessions of a Section 8 Landlord. So my goal is really to tell all the things I did wrong and what I learned from them so that other people who are going into Section 8 know how to avoid some of these things. Like, for one thing, you have to cap all the external water sources of the building. A lot of time with Section 8, those external water sources, which may have been used to water the lawn or the flowers, end up being a car wash business, or they become a swimming pool for the tenants, or maybe the kids went crazy one day and they made a swamp like they did in my property. So you have to cap it, lock it, make sure they don't have access to external water sources. There's something else a lot of people don't know, that with Section 8, you don't have to have the building be certified Section 8. It's actually per tenant. There are some buildings where they have master leases with Section 8, but for the most case, it's case by case per application. So a lot of people ask me about the process. They're like, "Oh, my building's not certified for Section 8." I'm like, "No, it's about the applicant." So when they apply and they get approved, then Section 8 comes out and they do a tour of the unit, make sure it's habitable, there's no peeling paint, everything works. But there's certain things that tenants tend to always break that aren't needed per that inspection. So like screen doors, always break. They don't need them. Or closet doors, 90% of the time, they always come off. They need to be fixed at every single inspection every year. You don't need a garbage disposal. That will always be broken.
Right.
Don't have a garbage disposal, don't have a dishwasher. It's more of like making it habitable, making it clean and nice, but don't provide extra services that you're going to have to fix every single inspection. They do an inspection every year.
Yeah. Yeah. That's some serious valuable information right
And
there.
then all the smoke detectors, just know the batteries will be out. So you just have to go back and actually, no, the batteries will be gone. The smoke detector will be gone because the battery will go off. They won't replace the battery, so they'll chuck the smoke detector. So every year, expect to put in a new smoke detector.
Okay, so the smoke detectors, even if you do the 10-year batteries, they'll come off the walls.
They're just off the walls. 90% of the time, they're off the walls. So just expect to just come in before your inspection and put more smoke detectors in.
So the the Stockton property, you got a
Mhm.
property management company that's managing it. I would imagine that's close by there.
I
eh,
did, except
oh,
for
you did.
when COVID happened, then I had to manage it through COVID. After that, after we passed through that, I ended up selling the building because I was done with it, which was a
Okay,
fun process in itself, but luckily we didn't lose any money on the deal. We actually
good.
made a little bit of money. I just wanted to have my life back and have the easier properties again.
Yeah, that was just a big internship.
It was a big internship. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's completely needed. You know, it's funny, some of the new investors that I teach them all this information, and it's funny, we'll go through a deal, and they'll go like, "Oh, that was pretty easy." I'm like, "No, it wasn't." There was like 20 steps behind that I navigated you through so that you wouldn't make those mistakes.
Mhm.
Or what I taught you how to set up your bank account and how to make sure you're tracking everything correctly using some software. You better stay organized in the very beginning because when you build a portfolio, there's gonna be things going on, whether it's the finance part of it to, having a bookkeeper. If you don't have those in place, you are gonna feel lost.
I still haven't gone a bookkeeper yet. I'm still doing it all my
Are you really?
I have this, like, massive Excel spreadsheet that I do once a month, and I'm like, "Man, I'm so close. I should just get one already."
QuickBooks has where you can set up each property by class, and then
Mhm.
it connects the software from the property management company can
Mhm.
connect to it as well, and so you can just get your P&Ls, and it's per property, so you know your
Oh, nice.
gross, your expenses. But yeah, I started off the way you did,
Yeah.
and that's the worst part of the business. I hate it. I don't like I'm not a bookkeeper. I ain't doing that, I'm sticking in my lane. I just wanna know what I got going on. I just wanna know my net every quarter. Where am I at?
Mhm. Yeah, I'll probably be there at one point, but I'm also looking at that other software. Have you heard of Baselane?
Base lane.
Yeah,
No.
it's a bank for, real estate investors that actually does all your accounting and all your bank accounts, and they can actually set like, if you're doing their properties yourselves, you can actually have them collect all the payments and do everything, and it's free, so that might be something I'm gonna be doing for my California properties.
Okay, cool.
Um,
I wanna check that
that's
out.
another direction that I'm going, but yeah, I definitely need to get my QuickBooks set up and stop doing my giant Excel spreadsheet, but you know what? I tell people too, like, don't overthink it. You can go simple, and then as you
You can.
grow, find more and more sophisticated software and programs that you can use, but don't go crazy with LLCs and systems and all this stuff when you have one property.
Right.
You have to grow with it.
Yeah, and the simplifying it, in the very beginning and kind of putting systems in place it's important. But do you like doing like spreadsheets or what are the things you don't like doing? That's a
Oh,
bigger thing. What do you
yeah.
not like doing?
I don't like taking tenants' phone calls.
I don't
I
think
don't want
anybody.
that I don't want that toilet conversation. Um, actually, I don't mind spreadsheets. I'm a very analytical person, so it's almost like me getting to know my properties every month. So I go through it and I go through like a fine-tooth comb of my property manager's reports and I find poke holes in all of them. And I'm an over manager. So that was a big issue for me too, is trying to not over manage my property managers because then they fire you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I just go in my little accounting thing and I make it super tight so I feel comfortable with my own investments. I know as I grow bigger and bigger, I won't be able to do that anymore. But that has kind of been my little crutch of feeling like I have a pulse on my property without actually managing it and being there. So some of these properties I've never actually ever been to.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. That's kind of where I'm at too. Same mindset, there I pop around throughout the portfolio. Like, where's the issues? Let's get it. Well, here's a good example. I just finished a rehab on a duplex out in Kansas City,
Mhm,
and one of the units is going to be a midterm rental, and the other one's going
mhm,
to be a long term. I want to first stabilize the midterm
mhm.
and make sure proof of concept's there, that it's making the money it is, and then I'll probably eventually turn the other unit into a midterm as well. Um, so it got furnished. I hired somebody locally and basically just shipped all the furniture to her, and then she went and put it together. And then it was like at 90%. I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna go out there for a couple days. flew out there, stayed at the property. And of course, when I got there, I'm like, oh, that needs to be touched up. That paint, oh, that needs to get, and there's the list, the handyman list. But the big one was the grass was so overgrown, and there was grass in the sidewalk going up to the bottom unit, which the bottom unit is on the market for rent. And so I saw it. I'm like, what the hell? Why? Wait, I thought I'm getting lawn service every week. So I call my assistant. Hey, can you check on that? She's like, oh yeah, you get it every week actually on Bell. I'm all, really? Well, no one's cutting this lawn, and it hasn't been cut in about a month.
Yeah.
So we called the property management. And I said, hey, lawn's not getting done. Am I getting charged? She's like, yeah, you got charged the whole last month. And then all of a sudden, 5 hours later, here comes the guy pulling up to do the lawn. And I catch him out there, and I'm like, hey, are you the owner? And he's like, no, I work for the owner. I'm like, you haven't been out here in a while. He's like, we've had bad weather. I'm like, yeah, but I got charged for a whole month. So, I guess the moral to the story, just because you have a property management company, you need to understand your owner distribution statement monthly. Like, you have to understand what's coming in, what's going out, what got repaired, what did you get overcharged for? Why are you getting grass? Why are they doing, grass maintenance on this property, but it's the owner's responsibility? There's there's a
lot of things that
there's a lot of things.
Yeah,
there's
for
a lot
sure.
of things.
Out of state, I always like to have two eyes on everything. So I don't like my property manager to also be my contractor. I like to have separate contractors, separate property managers, separate real estate agents. So I have two eyes on everything. So if there's some disconnect and one person says it's done, the other person says it's not,
yes,
someone's not telling the full story here. And so that's helped me a few times, just so that I have multiple people to talk to that don't have relationships with each other.
100%. That's so true. Like, I definitely have the same. I have a couple runners, people that I know that do multiple things. Some are agents, some are handyman, and I move them around to check on things, because you have to, because there's stuff that slips through the cracks, if you don't have people on the ground. And I know a lot of people talk about investing out of state and that you don't really need to go to your properties. That is true in theory, but there is times when it does make sense to go out and get your eyes on things.
For sure.
Doesn't have to be all the time.
Flying out there, hopefully in June, we're gonna look at some auctions out there. So we'll go and see all the properties, just drive by them and make sure they're still there.
They're still. What's going on there? So as far as the Section 8's concerned, what else have you learned from, do you feel like that's your favorite strategy?
So far it is. I've found that it was very helpful during COVID too, because we had guaranteed rent. When people weren't paying rent, we still had a good lump sum guaranteed by the government. And it also helps us check our property managers too, because they do those annual inspections. So I know if there's something that's fixed, that needs to be fixed, or something's going out the property that I wouldn't have known otherwise. And I just find the cash flow is so good if you're looking for cash flow in those C-class properties, which mainly are Section 8. And while Section 8 is great, subsidized housing that's from a local organization normally is better, because it's guaranteed, and normally they care more. Like, they have more people that they have it as a resource, versus Section 8, it's so many people that are trying to serve. They just don't have enough time. And so some of the local services, they'll give you better incentives. I've had one actually fill all my unit with new appliances for the tenant. And they offer wraparound services to help them succeed. And often they don't get to keep it for forever. It's normally like a year or two, and they graduate for the program. So they have more incentive to get on their feet and get a stable job and do these things. Right where I had in my 12-plex, we worked with an organization who we primarily rented to them over Section 8. And I had a connection with the relationship manager for landlords. And she would call me up and always ask me, do you have any vacant units or units that are about to become vacant? And so I'd give her a heads up before it hit the market, because she would have someone in place right away. And they specialize in getting single parents that are on the street with their children into housing. So we were housing all these families off the street, and then we'd see them graduate from these programs. And often they would eventually move out of our building into an even nicer area, into a single family home. And they were just overall better tenants. Not saying that Section 8 is bad tenants. You have to screen them as you would, anybody. They're people. But I found these local organizations had better resources, better incentives for the landlords. And really the landlord relationship manager was the key, because if you ever had any problem, you just give them a call and they'd work through it with you, because they want to control all your units. They want to fill all your units because there's such a housing shortage, especially if you're in California. So find that local organization, that nonprofit that works on housing and and subsidizes it, is probably your best bet, even over Section 8.
Interesting. Yeah, and then those tenants somehow ended up in that organization as well, right? And so that shows, is that how that shows a little bit more of an incentive on the tenants, you know, putting some effort into getting good housing, right? Would that
Yeah,
be?
they didn't
Yeah.
wanna lose their voucher, and I didn't realize, I was very sheltered. I didn't realize that when I had a property in Stockton, I was talking to people, um, like here, we want to become our parents tell us to become lawyers, to become doctors, and things like that. There, their parents are telling them, "Get on Section 8, you've made it in life." I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
That it was a complete mentality shift, so you see the different mentality for people on Section 8 versus some of these, like, subsidized local programs are very different. Not saying it's for everybody, but we did come across that specifically in our neighborhood, and found that the local organizations were definitely just overall better applicants and better support systems, yeah.
And and as far as the condition of the property when they
Mhm.
come up on that year inspection, then you know too how much they've kind of wear and teared the house up,
Oh,
right?
for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
As long as they didn't do anything that broke the lease. Like, I've had tenants that bring in animals that weren't supposed to have animals, and then that really wrecks the unit. But for the most part, these units are not, like, where we would probably wanna stay. I mean, they're habitable, they're clean, they're nice, but they're not, like, granite countertops and,
Right.
like, top of the line finishes. So there's only so much they can really do to the unit. Like, I just know I'm gonna paint every time, and I'm gonna fix this and this, and if they, demo the kitchen cabinets, that's a whole different issue.
Right.
But, for the most part, it wasn't too much of a big deal, except for the tents we originally got from the previous owner. Those we always had issues with people doing some creative things and putting, like, was something I saw. They put in pretend marble, like sticky marble on top of our brand new flooring all over. That was fun. I was like, "This is great."
Ha-
Pull all
ha-
this stuff up.
this ain't coming off.
Uh-uh. Nope. The tenant do-it-yourself stuff gets a little interesting.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, they were trying to make it look
They're
a little,
trying to make it look
make it
nice,
look a little
but
better.
that
Yeah.
was also the swimming pool one, but
What's the difference? So you brought up the difference between investing in Indiana compared to California with, tenant rights and landlord rights and all that good stuff. What are the big difference that you see as far as between the two
well, like, during COVID, you couldn't get anyone out. I would actually call a lawyer, and they wouldn't answer the phone. They would not answer the phone because they were all shut down.
in
No one
California?
in California, no
Yeah.
one I literally had someone who was who was given a unit by a family member who left because they knew that they couldn't get him out, and their girlfriend got out of prison, and she was shooting up our building, and we couldn't get them out. So, there was a lot of really creative problem solving with those in California, whereas in Indiana, it was during COVID, and if someone really was struggling, of course, I would help them out, but there was also people who were bending the rules a bit, and for people that weren't actually, out of a job or things like that, and they weren't paying rent, we were able to evict them, no problem. It was, like, 30 days
Boom,
during
just like
during
that.
COVID, just yeah, boom like that, whereas in California, it was very difficult, and there was situations where, we have a 12-unit building, and it's our responsibility to keep all of our tenants safe from some tenants that are unsafe, and we can't get them out, but we are legally responsible if something was to go wrong. Um, so that was a very, precarious situation.
Your story is wild. I mean,
Oh, I have
I don't
plenty.
think people really understand, like, this is, you know, and probably you look back and it's better that you didn't know any of this. Like you didn't know anything
Oh,
that you're going to go
yeah.
through, because if this would have been the case, and you would have never, ever, ever started investing.
Oh, of course, of course. Well, I always tell people it always ends up happening like your first property. If your first property goes well, you're probably going to keep investing. If your
Yeah.
first property goes poorly, you'll probably stop. So I've noticed that trend a lot with people. And my first one was amazing. I had no problems with it. Went up in equity, like it was great. And then that made me realize, even though I had this horrible property, there is other properties that are great.
Absolutely. That's so true. Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of like what I just said, earlier.
Yeah.
I go through the same thing. You know what I mean? Like I have like 80% going good. Then I got the problem child over here that I'm, going, why am I even in, this damn East Detroit property? I got to get rid of it. But man,
Yeah.
that pays for all my food and my car payment, and
Sometimes the problem ones are the cash flow ones. Like
they are. That is another big part. You might get that number, but that number is going to come with a cost.
It comes with other costs for sure. I mean, yeah, if you have the super easy luxury, beautiful A-class properties that don't give you any headaches, but they break even or they lose money. But over time, you're going to get great appreciation. It's just a different game, and you have to have the stomach for it.
Well, and I almost feel, look, I don't care what asset class you're in, they all have issues.
Of course.
You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, that's really what there's going to be some pros and cons. You're going to have some good wins. You're going to have some issues. And that's part about investing in real estate. And that's why the government stays out of it. That's why they're not the one. That's why they're not landlords,
That's why. I mean, I work a lot with consulting on Section 8, also for local programs that are nonprofits. I even came across one in Northern California where like the government was managing it, and they didn't have the money to update it. So they were going to have to sell it off to someone else, because the government became a slumlord because they didn't raise the rents to cover the expenses. So over time it got worse and worse and worse, and they had to sell it off to an investor who could actually make those improvements. And yes, he's going to raise the rents, but he has to do so to cover, the costs of making it actually livable.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that. I think that people see landlords as, what's the big word I see? I get called this one a lot. Parasites.
Oh,
My favorite one. You're a parasite. Really? You would not want the government taking over and being your landlord, because I will tell you, you're going to be in a worse situation by far, because there's a lot of work to here in this property that you're living in. I'm doing my best to make it really nice for you. I take care of things. I don't want things to go unnoticed and broken. Like, I don't think people sometimes realize that. And of course, like you said, there's really bad tenants and there's really bad landlords.
of course.
But that goes with pretty much anything in life. Any business has its good points and bad points, and that is the reality. But people love to focus on landlords being parasites.
Well, it's funny though,
That's
because
the
you look
word.
at the numbers, and most landlords are actually small mom and pop landlords
Of course. Yes. For
that
the
are
most part.
using
Yeah.
it to supplement their income. So it's very much a different story that's being painted across the media. So it's an
Yeah.
interesting conversation to have.
And are you a long-term thinker, and like you see the bigger picture down the road? You're not, because you see that a lot online too, that, you can buy a couple properties, you get cash flow, and you're going to quit your 9 to 5. It's like,
No.
where is that happening? I mean, yes, that, I guess in theory, some places you could pull that off. I know, I know that's not happening where I live in
I mean,
California.
right now I could leave and live in Thailand and I'd be financially free like that. But I mean,
that is true. That is true. Okay. All right. I'll give you
it
that.
just depends, what your lifestyle is, where you want to live. I mean, I have a little one. I can't just bail and go live in paradise.
Yeah. No, it's a long-term play.
Yeah, it's a long-term play for sure. And what your goals are and how active versus passive you want to be.
Yeah. And what do you, so besides investing, like what else does investing translate for you and just your overall life? Do you know what I mean? Because I think there's so many things that you get a lot of skills from investing, that you don't really understand that you're actually creating these skills until
Mhm.
you've created them. You know what I'm saying? Like, where is that translate? So I guess it's translated. You started as an investor. Now you're an
Mhm.
agent too.
Now I'm an agent, yes.
Okay. So you got
Yep.
that side. You wrote a book.
I
Where
transitioned to an
else?
author, a public speaker, and now I
There you
work
go.
with government and local nonprofits to help give back and, bridge that gap between, these organizations and landlords because there's a lot of, infighting and we really need to have common ground. So I work with those organizations as well as other investors who are looking to start and grow their own portfolios. I feel like once you start getting into this, you learn so much that you don't realize how much knowledge you have and that you can give so much back to other people.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great point. It's so true. It is. Yeah, and it's always great to give the things that you did, wrong or what happened to you so you like don't make that mistake.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Those are the
it's
best.
funny, my
You
mother
write a book on that.
yeah, for years, my mother was like, "You gotta write a book, you gotta write a book," and I'm like, "No, no, no," and I'm like, "You know what? Screw it. My friend did it, I can do it." He wrote a book, and, you don't really realize until you write it all down or you start reading a blog or whatever you're doing to give back that you have all this insight. Sometimes you're like, "Oh, I'm too small of a player," 'cause there's other people who are so much bigger than me, but there's always gonna be people who are bigger than you. And there's always gonna be people who are smaller in regards to their size of portfolio. And, someone else might be able to help you and you can help somebody else.
Yeah, it's interesting what you brought that up. There's a lot of, limiting beliefs and I go through it. Everybody goes through it and at all different levels. It seems like even the ones that you think have it all together are always
Yeah.
second guessing themselves as well. I'm starting to learn that from talking to, people that are very well off and have big portfolios and they're big on social media. And I hear some of their backstory. I'm like, oh my gosh, they got a lot of self-doubt too. Like what, but they're
Oh,
trying to
everyone does.
yeah,
Everyone does. It's all about
yeah,
breaking through the next level of like, "Oh, I can't make that income," and then you do it, and you're like, "Oh, wow, I reached this level. Now I can make more." I just have to get past that mental, break. You just have to get past that and realize that the, possibilities are endless. It's just a matter of getting through your own roadblocks in your mind.
totally. It's so true. And I go through that so much. But then it's like I just kind of grind at it, like I just keep going, going, going. Okay, I'm gonna make this work. And then it's like, yeah, it's okay. And then just keep doing it. Consistency and determination will go a long way.
Yeah.
I don't ever think of myself as I always go, I don't even know how I'm doing all the stuff that I do sometimes. Like, I think that in my head. I don't feel like I'm that smart. I just have determination and I just do it.
Well, we all have
Yeah.
imposter syndrome. I
Yes.
I see it all the time where we are in denial of how much we've actually accomplished, and you have to look back and realize it. Or I go to a meetup and this one person, she's like, "Oh, I didn't wanna become a meetup. I'm not an investor." I'm like, "Well, you're here, so you're going to be an investor. Come here." Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people, they just have this imposter syndrome, and you kinda have to give them a mirror back to themselves so they can actually, get past it a little bit.
Yeah. It's that safety net for the brain.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like we're
Yeah.
kind of 1 minute, we'll be on our high horse and going, okay, we can do whatever. And then like, hey, I don't know. Let's think about this. Should we? Not gonna be
Yeah.
okay. I think when my brain says that, it means go.
Yep.
Yeah. What do you like to do for fun?
I love to sing karaoke.
You do?
Karaoke? Not saying I'm good at it, but I like to do it. And then, my husband and I actually were ballroom dance partners.
Really?
Yeah, that's how we met.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
cool. You guys still do it?
Not so much since we had a little one, it's hard to get away at night, but, we'd bust out a move at a party pretty well.
Do you? Yeah. Feel like
It's a good little trick to pull out.
the song comes up, you guys like look at each other from across the
Yeah.
room and it's like, ready? So, you have a boy or girl?
A boy, he's 6.
Cool. How's
Yeah.
that been?
It's been good. He's so funny. You don't realize how much kids pick up until they start just spewing it back at you, and I'm like, "Oh, I said that?"
Yeah.
He's already, like, decided he's created his own business, he's gone and sold the farmer's market, and now he's decided he traded up, he took some of that money, now he bought a popcorn machine to then sell at games,
Oh,
and I'm like,
man.
"What have I created?"
Oh gosh. That is so great. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's some good that's a
we had some talks about what wealth is and what rich is, and we talked about Warren Buffett, and he's like, I need stock, mom." I'm like, "Okay, let's
Yeah.
figure out how to buy you stock."
Yeah. Just a little go a long way. It's just
Yeah.
it's the thought process, you
Oh,
know.
yeah. He's just picking everything up like a sponge.
It's interesting they didn't teach, well, there's just a lot that we leave out as, as we go to school that I wish I would have known earlier. Like I got a little glimpse of it, Hey, I didn't get going at same story. Why is it that you hear people online or they go on a podcast or YouTube and they're like, what got me into investing in real estate was I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. That one book, that
Mhm.
book, you
That
know,
book.
that book. It's so crazy. And I told people recently that I've had a couple friends that want to invest. They got the money. They say they don't have the time, but they got the time. They
Oh,
can
everyone has
structure
the
it.
time.
Yeah, they got the time. If I can do what I'm doing, you got the time. And and it's funny because they keep coming back on different mentalities. And I go, that I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I didn't even buy my first investment property for 10 years later. 10 years.
Mhm.
10 years. Read that book. I was just getting like my act together, so to speak. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
And got my license, became an agent. 2008, the market crashed. I wish I would have known what I know now in 2008, everything would have been different. I thought the
Yeah.
world's ending and no, don't buy real estate. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just helping these people that are losing homes.
Mhm.
That's all I knew
Yeah.
until I read that book on the beach in Kauai that I was like, oh, I'm doing this all wrong. Wow, I gotta do it. And it was on my brain. But back in 2009, 10, we
Mhm.
didn't have social media. You went to a conference and met this person maybe flipping houses and they would talk and then you'd walk out after it's all done and buy a CD.
Mhm.
There was no social, nobody was teaching things online. So it felt so unattainable back
Mm.
then for me. And it's funny that I kept it on my brain so long until I finally, you know what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
think people think everything should happen overnight. Everything should be done. Like it could be a long drawn out process, but stay with that process because that's just part of your journey in life in general. It's just a part of it. It's,
Mhm.
you got your family, you got your kid, you know what I mean? Like it's all this big picture, but I think sometimes people don't want to start, give up too soon, or just want instant gratification. And
Yeah,
that's
it's
just not
slowly
how
but
it is in
surely.
life in
Yeah,
general. It's
slowly
crazy.
but surely, unless you have a huge bankroll that you can just deploy immediately, and even then, you might not have the knowledge to do it correctly, so
Right. You better have the Sarah mentality.
just go
Here's
for it, trial by fire, baby.
trial by fire. I mean, yeah, wow. That's such a crazy story. And I've been following a few people that are doing Section 8, but your story blows. They make it seem so easy and they don't, and two, big part of it is they don't tell the real story
Yeah,
because I
I
think
mean,
people have that.
everyone has normally 1 or 2 horror stories. You go to a meetup and you're like, "What's your horror story?" "Well, I got 20."
Yes.
They're all together
On this one property.
on 1 property. I mean, not many people can say they had to tell off a drug lord like my husband had, so well, those kind of things that are just like, "Hmm, let's be a little careful next one we pick," but, I mean, really, since it was the worst place we could have picked, or one of the top worst places, it's like, how bad could it be?
Right. How many times did you actually go to how many times did you end up entering that building?
Well, my husband wouldn't allow me to enter the building after we knew how bad it was, so I went out initially, and we did the whole inspection and stuff, and once we realized it was really how bad it was, my husband would go out to the property. He wouldn't let my in-laws go to the property. He wouldn't let anyone else near the property because he was honestly afraid for their safety. It was a very, very dangerous street. Like, people were getting shot all the time. There was a drug lord that wanted to trap out of our building, and he was trying to trick us and use certain tactics to get into our building, knowing we wouldn't be able to get him out because of COVID. So there was a lot of really dangerous situations going on. We had people shooting up in our apartment building, like shooting
Wow.
guns off. So I was not at that property once we had figured out what was going on. He went out there probably once we started managing it, once every 3 months. We had
But
someone that was working with us in the building, kind of be our eyes and ears since we were managing it.
oh,
Um, she was
how did you get that relationship? Did you just was it a kind of a feeling you start talking and you kind of
No, she actually reached out to us. She was a caregiver for one of the tenants there. I use that term very loosely because I don't know if she was actually really a caregiver. She was a very unique personality, but she did help us get out of a lot of binds. She also caused a lot of problems herself too.
oh,
So,
really?
yeah, she was a very interesting character. I learned a lot of interesting ways of getting rid of people. Not that I did it, but she was like, "I can get rid of this person." I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Oh, I know where all the pigs are. You put a body there, you'll never find it." I'm like, "No, no,
What?
don't touch anybody." There was someone that we had a squatter breaking into our basement. They'd pull up the basement with a crowbar and they'd try and live in the basement. We'd call the cops. They'd drop him down the street, just catch and release, and he'd keep coming back. We couldn't get a restraining order, couldn't get anything. And she took it upon herself to get rid of this person. We didn't ask her to. I was like, "Oh, the problem's gone." Like, well, I was a little nervous after the pig conversation. Like, what did you do? Like, where is this man? Is he alive? She's like, "Oh, yeah, he's fine. He's fine. I verified he's alive." I'm like, "You verified he's alive? What do you mean you verified he's alive?" She's like, "Oh, I offered to give him a ride and asked if he wanted a drink." I'm like, "What would you put in the drink?" She's like, "Oh, red eye drops." I'm like, "Red eye drops? What do red eye drops do?" I looked up red eye drops. They can put people in a coma. There was actually a
What?
case where, a wife ended up putting her husband in a coma with a bottle of red eye drops,
It
and
oh,
so she
whoa.
knocked him out and dropped him off three towns over.
Whoa.
I was like, "Oh my god." We never had
Wow.
that problem again, but I was like,
She took matters into her own hands.
"I did not tell her to do that. She's not my employee." I was just like, "Oh my god, you coulda killed him." She's like, "I verified he's alive." But
I
I was like, "What are you talking about?" I had to research this. I never heard this before, and this is a real thing about red eye drops, so be careful with those.
yeah, I'm making a mental
Get rid of the red eye drops in the cabinet.
wow, this is great. This is some crazy stories. I didn't expect this. I'm so glad I didn't read your book too up front because I would have known this and I would have been as shocked. So because you have these stories in there. Um, what are your plans for the future? What are you looking to try to do?
Well, now that I have a bunch of, C-class properties in the Midwest, I do wanna come back to California and do some more of that development. I really wanna start, building out large ADUs and sectioning them off. I know we have a major housing crisis here, just not having enough homes and focusing on homes that are, under 1,000,000, being able to resell these for, like, 8.99 or 7.99, something that's actually attainable, where I make a good amount of money and so does someone who needs a home.
Yeah,
So that's kind of what we're pivoting towards and trying to do some more so we kinda balance out our portfolio as well as bring it kinda back to our home state too.
that's exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We all got the same mentality.
exactly. Well, and two, I think with building, it's you can focus right on what's going on, and it's in you're managing, a few people, so to speak. You got your
Mhm.
contractor, maybe your architect, your surveyor. Like you got a little bit more control than, let's say, dealing with a 12 unit and with a drug lord.
Yeah. Yeah,
Different
for
ball
sure,
game.
for sure. I mean, we've done full, rehab guts out in the Midwest, and those were stressful enough. I think I would like to do one
Yes.
more here where I can physically see it and, like, have a team that I meet with. It's just a different game, and I wanna have a different class set as well.
Yeah, that's great. Do you know what cities in your area are actually looking to implement
Yeah,
AB
I'm
1033?
actually looking right in my hometown area. I'm in Woodland Hills in Los Angeles County, and I'm looking in the San Fernando Valley. We had one that we made an offer on. It was like a 16,000 square foot lot. I was like, "This is perfect. It's huge." And it had a main house that could turn into a duplex. The only thing was it was, agricultural RA zoned. You can only build, 5,000 square feet on that, which, I mean, you can still make really good money because the house is about a little under 2,000. You can add, 1,500 ADUs in the back. Do maybe even sell them off. Maybe do a subdivision with an HOA and sell those to a first-time home buyer.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. So where I'm from, they haven't passed. Like San Jose's looking into, implementing everything. I think Berkeley's like top on the list right now
Yeah.
of putting it into place.
Well, there's a lot of gray area right now because it hasn't really been pushed through, but it's still kind of available. Like, there's a lot of, like, townhomes that they do that, where they take, like, a big, long lot, they demo the main house, and they build, like, 4 to 5 townhomes. They don't split the
Yes.
lot. They do a subdivision with an HOA, do tenants in common, and sell it off.
Right.
So it's more about being able to finagle that with the city as well as your brokerage and making everything fit together, because it's still a lot of gray. There's no real clear outline yet for this coming out and what's going to happen with it. But taking kind of that blueprint of what these investors have done in the past with these townhome builds, I'm assuming it'll be somewhat similar to that.
Yeah. I think that's why we're starting out in Seattle, where they've already been doing it. Like
Yeah.
everything's kind of implemented, and everybody who's an investor-friendly agent, they have the ball rolling.
Yeah.
The only problem out there is just inventory is low, and it's tons of competition. But
Do they
we're
have a
trying to.
framework yet in Seattle all laid out? And are you in the process in Seattle, like, actually doing that and
Oh
selling
yeah,
off individually?
oh yeah. They're
Oh,
already
cool.
doing. They've been doing it out there for a while now. So that part's the easiest. And funny enough, how it all came about, I had a couple of people that I met at the Bigger Pockets conference on my podcast, and they were bringing it up. And then I had another lady that I met on Furnish Finder. She was on an episode. I had
Mhm.
her on the podcast, and I got done. And I went, oh, and then I had a contractor out there, and I was like, wait a minute, I got a whole team, and they're
Yeah.
cool. You know what I mean? I've had them on my podcast. Like, I've had this intimate hour conversation, and I can just tell, with an
Yeah.
hour on them, like, okay, I like them, and that goes a long way in investing. If you can have the team that you actually like to talk on the phone and you get along with.
Mhm.
So I said, you know what? I'm going to start out there. Flew out there, met the team,
Mhm.
cruised the neighborhoods, learned a lot about Seattle, went down to Tacoma, met with Ann, and yeah, we're moving. We've been writing offers. We haven't got into contract. I thought I was going to get in contract a
Mhm.
couple weeks ago. We thought we had it, and funny enough, this property that we wrote an offer on was literally right across the street from where my agent lives, and he had just bought a property. He converted the basement into a unit, and he built a dadu, a 2,000
Mhm.
square feet, 2-story, looked like a white, kind of like a farmhouse, Northwestern style
Mhm.
home. And so I saw the whole layout, how he did the landscape, how he separated everything. I'm like, and I saw the alleyways. There's a lot in
Mhm.
Seattle. They have a lot of alleyways. And I'm all, yeah, this is cool. And I was just tripping out on the neighborhood too. I'm like, God, this is such a nice neighborhood. I think he bought the house for like 7, maybe even less. I don't even know, but
Mhm.
somewhere in that range. Um, that would be $2 million in San Jose. So
Mhm.
I don't know. So I saw the house across the street. He goes, hey, you can write an offer on this one. It's on the market. We did all cash. Thought we were going to lock it up. Somebody else came in. They did an escalation clause.
Mm.
And then that agent came back to us and said, hey, do you want to improve your offer? I'm like, well, counter us. Like I said, now you want me to compete against myself. We
Yeah.
thought, so we didn't get it. Long
Well, there's
story
always the
short.
next one.
Yeah. We'll go to the next one, but that's where we are starting out there. Tacoma just passed are passing where you can sell off the dadus. And so that's going to
Mm.
happen in the summer. That's a little better price point than Seattle.
Mhm.
And I got a great team just
Oh, it's great.
ready to go out there. So I want to learn out there and
Mhm.
bring that knowledge into California, because California, like I said, they pass something. It's not as cut and dry. Like
It's not as
we're
cut
gonna
as
wait.
dry. You're gonna call people, and half people know what you're talking about, half people don't, and you have to get the right person on the right day with the right time. Like,
True.
all
Yeah.
those things have to align,
Yeah.
and you have to know your way around the system or have a team that does.
Absolutely. 100%. That's the best way to end this, Put the right team together that knows what they're doing and is a, expert in their section of what they do.
Mhm.
Definitely. Um, where can the audience find you? I know I'm
You
going to
can
link your
find-
book. I'm going to
Yeah.
link your book.
You can see my book, Confessions of a Section 8 Landlord, or you can find me online on my website, saraaviles.com. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle down there, sarah.aviles.exprealty.
Cool.
So those are some ways to find me.
That's great. Well, this has been a great episode. Man, I have to thank Alex after. I'm gonna get done with this. I'm gonna text him and just be like, "Oh my
I'm
gosh,
glad.
I had Sarah on. It was crazy. She kept me on my toes the whole damn hour." So, yeah, this has been great, Sarah. I really appreciate you taking the time to jump on the podcast today, and congrats on your first ever podcast. You did an amazing job, and you brought a lot of value. This was a really good episode. I think it was really packed with some really good gems. So I really appreciate it.
Great. Well, I appreciate you inviting me on the show, and it was a great first experience on being a podcast. So
Yeah, it's awesome. All right, I'll be talking to you soon. You have a great day.
you too.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning into our show, where we hope you found inspiration and gained valuable insights. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to stay updated on our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe to our podcast and share it with others who might benefit from it. We appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more candid conversations and breakthrough moments in the future. Until next time, take care and keep exploring new ideas and strategies.